thank you for joining us today, Dan.
It's a
I really
pleasure.
appreciate your time. And look, as we start, what I'd love to ask our guests is, how did your Kinderloop journey begin?
Oh, goodness me. So it must have been about 10 and a half years ago, we'd had our first child, and I was that dad. I was that dad who went to pick up my little girl from daycare, and we used to read the little book in the corner where we used to sign our names out and stuff. And on the days that she wasn't mentioned, which were more than not, I kind of used to walk out of there going, well, has she done anything? Is she, and I think it's that first child syndrome, where you kind of go, is she okay? Did she have a good time? All that kind of stuff. And I'm not a helicopter parent at all, or whatever they're called, hover parent, I don't know. And so in the back of my mind, I think I had this idea of kind of going, well, there's got to be a better way than this, of these educators having to write down all the stuff that they were doing and sticking pictures in the book and all that kind of stuff. And it was at that time that I caught up with a fellow friend who was having a kind of similar idea, but for preschool. And literally over coffee, sitting on a grassy knoll, we came up with the idea of Kinderloop. And it literally, within 2 weeks, we had a website, we had a rough idea of what we wanted to do. He'd applied for an accelerator program, and bang, we were doing it.
And life turned around.
It was ridiculous. I mean, because his background was in tech anyway. My background's not in childcare or tech. I'm a designer and kind of creator by trade. So it was really strange. It just sort of happened. And before I know it, I'm pitching the idea in Silicon Valley and stuff like this. And it was absolutely bizarre. And then here we are 10 years later.
And your children are no longer at kindy, right?
No, one of them's in Ush. So we still get kind of updates and things like that through Ush, but no, they've moved on, and we're sort of helping that next generation, which is really weird.
Wow, well, that's so amazing, because quite often people have ideas, right? But it's actually putting it into action.
Well, one of the things I got taught very early on in this journey was everybody has ideas. It's whether they actually take them to fruition. That's the hard bit. And it's so true. I mean, often we'll have 101 ideas a day, but it's whether we act on them or not. And,
yes.
Do we actually see if we can make them work? And if we do, does it, do we kind of see beyond those other things that get in the way?
Yeah. And I suppose, look, and even if I'm thinking about even right to educators in services, right, they have ideas, like, obviously as well. And the Kinderloop journey for you, even though it was outside of what you would normally do, I'm sure you had some failures along the way, that it didn't all, it just wasn't all roses and...
No. I don't think it's ever all roses if you're working in the early childhood industry. It was really interesting. I think we realized early on in our journey, and we're talking in the first probably 6 months or so, that the parent side was easy. That wasn't the challenge. And we were lucky in that we realized this very early on. The more educators that we met and spoke to, we realized that they were the ones that were struggling with time and energy and, having all this stuff that they had to do. And we were lucky in the fact that I had access to not only long day care, but my daughter also went to a family daycare. And so I was able to kind of sit down with this lovely lady called Deb and just chat to her about her role and her job. And, it turned out that she was having to do paperwork on the weekends and, all this kind of other stuff that we never even knew about. And as we spoke to more and more educators, those kind of stories came out a lot more. So that was kind of, it very much flipped on its head. We sort of started off thinking, okay, it's the parents that we need to help. But very quickly it turned into, okay, how can we help all the educators? And how can we take this profession and really try and help it the best we can? And that's kind of, I mean, that's us in a nutshell, really. I mean, when we think of Kinderloop 10 years on, we still abide by that rule. You know, are we actually helping educators? Are we empowering them to be the best that they can be, as opposed to dumbing them down, or you know,
Yeah.
hindering them, making their work harder? You know, we have this motto of beautifully simple, which, to be honest, it's a challenge. It's, yeah, look, whenever you're in technology, beautifully simple is probably the hardest thing to do.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I didn't know this, but
I I I get it. I absolutely
yeah,
hear you. Being in early learning sector software for over 15 years, or about, I can't remember now. Lost count of how many years. I know the beautifully simple.
yeah.
The things that go on in that back end to do that is extremely difficult.
Well, it's. I mean, it's the same in everything. I think, you know, in life in general, it's the simple things that are, you know, sometimes the best, because they've had a lot more thought in it, and I think people have taken out a lot of the kind of fluff. And we're very mindful of the fact that educators don't need a lot of fluff. You know, give them the ability to shape the product the way they want it to be, and then turn everything else off. And I
Yes.
think, you know, and have it hidden so that they're not kind of cluttered by tons and tons of things to look at each day and things like that, so that they can
Yeah.
really focus and concentrate on, I guess, being their
I
best
get-
selves, and in turn, you know, helping the children and, you know, and each other. I think that's the other key thing here is you know, making sure that we're creating something that educators can feel proud of. And I guess it brings up that idea of confidence within the profession. And that's a really big thing for us. You know,
Yeah.
it's watching educators go through A&R. It's about them feeling confident,
It
you know?
is, and actually having the tools to
Mm,
support the process, not
yeah,
looking through boxes of paper and archives and
yeah. But having said that, I mean, we still talk to lovely educators who are just making their transition to digital,
yes. Oh,
and it's fantastic. You know, it's really good to see. And I think, if we've learned anything in this journey of ours, it's not to be too precious about things. I think, you know, every educator that we've ever met, and there've been thousands, um, they've all been different. They've all documented differently. They've all thought about things differently. They have a different bunch of children. They have a different situation within their service. And, you know, giving them those tools to kind of say, right, you can do whatever you need to do with these tools, as long as it makes you feel empowered, confident, less stressed, less time poor, then,
then
you
it's
know, happy
then you're
days.
winning.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah,
I guess so. I mean, and that's the thing, you know, we don't feel like we don't need to rule the industry. We want to change it along with all the other great products that are out there. It's about helping the industry as a whole, and that's really important, I think, to understand that that's, you know, that's one of the key features here, is that we're all
yeah,
helping. You know,
yeah.
we're all doing our little bit.
And there's the great products that are out there that can
Mm,
help, that can make a difference to
yeah,
those educators, and of course, moving right up through your management. Now,
yeah.
this will move us on to our next question. Like, as we talk about educators, they do have a lot to deal with, right? There's
Oh my
so
goodness,
much we can't even cover that in a 20-minute
you
segment.
can't.
That's another time.
I think, yeah, I think. Look, it's in the early days of Kinderloop, I was doing a lot of speaking things and stuff like that, and I came across quite a few educators who were physically moved by the amount of work that they had to do. And this is, you know, this is 9 or 10 years ago, and I think, you know, there was one particular lady who, we were sat in a big auditorium, and we were chatting away, and she was crying in the audience, and someone turned to her and said, you know, what, are you okay? And she said, I'm just so overwhelmed by all the things that I have to do. And that really made an impression on me, because I still think of that lady today. and it hasn't changed a huge amount. It's actually probably got worse in some ways, in that, educators they're responsible for so many things. Whether it's cleaning or organizing or food handling or
Playing
making sure the
outside.
checklists and and this is aside from the fact that they need to do all their documentation.
Yes, yes.
They have all these other things that they need to do and be on top of.
Compliance, is a big part of it. Health and safety, all of that. Risk management, let alone CCS and attendance.
I know, it's fascinating to see, because you think, well, at the end of the day, wouldn't it be lovely if educators only had to be with the children and document the children's, elements, leave all the other stuff behind, and have an office person who does that. It's
and maybe a cleaner.
Well, exactly. So I think there's definitely a lot of stuff that gets put onto some of those educators. And look, I think, again, at the end of the day, having tools at your disposal that allow those things to be recorded and documented really, really quickly and easily, I think that's a really key thing, because that's the only way you're going to save those educators time. But yeah, it's still there. It's still, we speak to educators on a daily basis, and some of them are really struggling.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter
so
what
much to
part
do
of the sector you're in, whether it be early learning, USH, kindergartens, family daycare, in-home care, all of those those providers that provide human care.
Yeah, exactly. I think some of the best things we've seen is services and FDC schemes who really support their educators, and really see it as a profession that is incredibly important in those early years of a child's development. And it's interesting when you understand how those services and those schemes work. A lot of it is about paring back some of that stuff that they need to do, and focusing on quality over quantity. And those, when you see them go through A&R and things like that, they do really well, because they're not too flustered. They know that they've covered off all of the things that they need to cover off, and it's been really interesting to watch that. Now, we're no expert, because we're not, but we do speak to a lot of educators, and we kind of see what works and what doesn't necessarily work.
You've got boots on the ground research.
Well,
is it?
Kind of.
We
do get to chat a lot.
Anecdotal, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Anecdotal.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's it's, if we can help one educator a day, that's we've done our job. I mean, honestly, that's really what it's about.
That's how I feel the same in my role too. It's exactly that. When you see the smile on someone's face, that you've just given them, a tool to save them some time. Then it's a great thing. It's fantastic.
The thing is, everyone benefits. That's the thing, is that not only the educator feels more confident and more in control, that obviously flows through to the child, who is happier and more loved and cared for, which then flows through to the parent, which feels they feel like they're in a good place, because their child is happy and learning and all those positive things. So it's a real knock-on effect, which is a real positive thing. So yeah, it's cool.
It is. Now, I know we spoke earlier about a 4-step plan.
Oh my! Don't talk to me about 4-step plans. Next, you'll be talking about tick boxes.
Oh, tick boxes! They're my favourite. You should know that.
Oh, we're not keen on tick boxes, but that's okay. That's okay.
Oh, no, not paper tick boxes.
No.
They're really not what you want to be doing right now, is it?
Not at all. Not at all.
No. So so helping someone in the service with that time pool, where you've got your educators who are sort of saying, hey, we need something. What would your 4-step plan look like?
Does it have to be 4 steps?
You can do 2 if you like.
You know what? I think I can only base this answer on what we've seen that works.
Yeah.
And some of that has to do with, understanding what is required by the governing bodies, so people like a SEQA and department and stuff like that. I think that's the first one, is to be confident and comfortable with those governing kind of things, and then making sure that as a service, that you are, dare I say it, ticking some of those boxes. When it comes to documentation, when it comes to, those whole checklists and all the things that you need to kind of make sure that you're doing. I think one of the key things that I've seen work really well is really understanding that less is more. If an educator is going to do an observation, make it the best observation they can do in the time that they've been allocated. It doesn't need to be, 15 observations. Just, do a group observation and make it the best one you can. Link it to your frameworks, link it to, what your service is thinking about and stuff like that. And I think that seems to work really, really well. In the fact that, all the educators are working together, they're all kind of, it's almost like a song. The parts of the song are coming together as a whole. And, obviously that comes from director and educational leader level, oftentimes. But it's also, I think one of the other things I would be keen to express is not being afraid to try new things. We've got an amazing service who, they teach us a thing or two when it comes to trying new things out. And it's been really, really amazing to see not only the response from their parents, their educators, and their children, but also how they represent that to a SEQA and to the governing bodies. And it seems to work incredibly well. And everyone's really excited by it. And I think that's really, really cool.
And what you just said about getting it through to those governing bodies in the SEQA, that's a skill in itself.
It is, yeah. It's that understanding, and I still don't fully understand the whole SEQA Department of Education kind of level of things, but I understand it from what we have experienced. And yeah, I think educators need help in understanding what is required of them, because I don't think there doesn't seem to be a set level when it comes to what's required of them, because I think a lot of the time their assessment and ratings are slightly different. And I think that's a good thing.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I think
agree.
it's definitely a good thing, but I think it does put a lot of pressure on educators to try and figure out what they're doing and how they're doing it.
But there's a recipe, but the recipe can often contain
exactly. It's like you can make a cake, but you can take half the sugar out. It still tastes good.
And it's better.
Wow, there's a good analogy.
It's a great analogy.
Exactly.
You still end up with the same looking cake.
I know. And it tastes great, and it's better for you.
With less is more, right?
Exactly.
Less is more, exactly what you said.
So I don't know. I mean, the 4-step plan thing, I would find that difficult to even sit and think about and write down, because I think, like I said before, out of all the educators we've met and all the services we've chatted to, every single one has been different. Every single one has had a different A&R experience. Every single one of them has a slightly different educational leader and, different ways of doing things. So I think it would be very difficult to understand what that 4-step process might look like. Yes. So I think as a holistic way of thinking about it, it's definitely less is more. It's definitely confidence, giving your educators time to do what they need to do without it impacting the children, because obviously at the end of the day, it all comes back to the children.
Yep. And you just can't say, sorry, you just sit in that corner for 5 minutes while I write a page of notes that...
Yeah, exactly.
May not be read.
I was chatting to an educator the other day, and she was saying that she's actually doing less documentation now because she just doesn't have time. Interestingly, she wasn't using Kinderloop, but she was saying that she was finding it harder to do her documentation because the system she was using was a bit different, but she was also getting less and less time to do it. So I think there's a real challenge there for a lot of educators and especially with the fact that there's not enough educators in the sector anyway. There's a massive skill shortage, all this kind of stuff. It's actually putting a lot more pressure on the ones that do believe, and want to stay in the sector.
And the new ones that are actually coming into the sector who have been fast tracked or, they're still learning themselves. They're looking, it's trainees to diploma or degree qualified, but they have different experience and different levels of knowledge compared to the ones that have been there for 10 years plus, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Which actually leads me into my next question is, looking forward for the sector, what do you think the big issues are for us?
That's a tricky one. I think staffing is obviously a big one. I think staffing isn't going to get better anytime soon. I think that the sector needs to understand that it is a profession, and it is a very much needed profession. And I don't know what that looks like when it comes to, attracting more amazing educators into that. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things.
So you're sort of saying really it's about the value we place on our staff.
We do. I mean, it's from day one of doing Kinderloop. I think the value that myself as a parent put on those educators was massive, because I had the guilt factor of leaving my child with someone else and having to go off to work and pay all the mortgages, and all that kind of stuff.
The fun bit.
Yeah. So I understood from my point of view as a parent what a huge amount of work that they did, and they were like my child's surrogate parents, really, in some form. Right. And I think as I understood more about educators from the Kinderloop side, I realized, and this has been going for 10 years, is that, how can you make them better? How can you, help the profession as a whole? And I think it's still struggling, from the same things, 10 years ago
yes.
that we saw. And it doesn't seem to be changing very fast. And I'm not sure what the answer is there, whether it's higher pay or, free education for educators, or I don't know what it is. It's a really tricky one.
It is a really tricky one. And sometimes systems like you're saying, like Kinderloop, and good quality early learning solutions can provide those tools and that enable, being able to enable that that next step, that next level of education, and all about that. But there's still more to be done.
Yeah, I think it's making sure that there is a community. One of the key things that we've tried to do is build on that community and help educators understand that there's lots of educators out there and they can help each other. And that's a tricky one because, we're up against things like Facebook and, all the social media type things. But at the end of the day, giving them a voice and a value, and I guess, putting them in touch with other people, other educators that are passionate about what they do, and who understand the importance of what they do. I think that's really, really important. We're just a very small cog in the big chain of things. But yeah, anything that we can do to help that is a positive, I think. So,
and like you said, it's that one. If you've helped one educator today, then that's a good thing because it's one educator that's in a good space.
And I mean, we have no qualms about talking to our competitors. It's we don't see it as it doesn't. To me, it's not about competition. To me, it's about well, what can we do as a team, as a collective whole to help the industry? And I think that's really important to understand. And maybe it's not a brilliant business model, but at the same time, we're all in this together. I think
And
that's
it's
the
certainly
thing to
not a
understand.
shrinking sector. It's a growing sector
Mm.
that we're all part of.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's that's such a. I agree with you on the sharing of the like the not the competitor thing. There's enough out there that we can work together. Is that?
Well, I think you also realise that when you do start talking to some of your, I call them competitors. I don't.
Yeah.
They're kind of not competitors in
Then
some ways, but you realise that when you talk to them that we're all doing the same thing for the same reasons, pretty much. There's a few that aren't, but that's okay. There's always a few, but I think that's a really positive thing because it means that you can work together on ideas and you can come up with thought processes and things like that, which I think is really, really cool.
And even like integrations, our software can talk to each other.
Yeah.
It's not a complicated thing these days, right?
No,
it's
not
all
at all.
about opening up to the team, to our team, our teammates, our colleagues, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And going from there and making sure that that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But,
very much.
Now, before we finish, we've had a great conversation.
I could keep going all day.
Everywhere. Oh, no,
we need a coffee, so we could just keep having a sip.
I know. I actually haven't had my coffee this morning.
Oh no!
Oh no! It's been too busy. I've just got water.
Yeah.
Now I know you said earlier what you said was if I help one educator a day, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
What we also want to know, is there any other motto or quote, or I call them wise. I love wise words.
Yes, so do I.
Yeah. Would you like to share anything with us today and our audience?
I have one that I sort of live by. It's not necessarily a Kinderloop one or anything like that, but it's listen twice as much as you speak.
Wow. That's good. I like that.
So it's yeah. I mean, you don't really need to explain it, but it's the idea that it's better to listen to people, and then when you do speak, you've pretty much got all the knowledge and all the information, and what you are going to say or what you communicate is potentially.
Yeah. And if you think about that in our sector, we could actually apply that as an educator, as a parent, as someone as an adult in that community, that we listen to our children, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings me to my second one, because I do have two, but the one that I've always lived by from when I was very, very little is that you teach best what you most need to learn.
I've heard that one before somewhere.
This is a fascinating one because, especially if you have children, there are many times where I find myself saying something to one of my children and I think to myself, I need to be telling myself that. Because I am completely being hypocritical right now and I need to listen to myself and think about what I'm saying.
I think I do what you're doing, but just not knowing that that's saying around it. You go, oh, okay.
I remember. I think it was my mum or my dad saying that to me, and when I was very young, and I thought to myself, yeah, whatever. But it stuck with me for so long, and I think here I am, age whatever, and I still think about it every day.
Yeah, that's great because
it's a good sector as well. Because I think you think about as an educator, how many times are you saying, telling or asking a child to do something when in fact, there might be a better way of asking it or learning from it. So.
And also that we may not be prepared to do ourselves.
Big time. Yeah.
Because
we're all little people inside, right?
we all want to be that child again, don't we? Right. Really? It's like, they have a lovely life, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes I look out I've got 20-year-olds and go, oh, wow, so nice to be that age.
Yeah. Mine aren't that old yet. So
You're still seeing it, aren't you? They're just the view of the world through lack of experience, maybe lack of life.
Yeah, and also it's also very different.
It is that rose-coloured glasses sort of vision,
Yeah,
and
very
no,
much.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But look, Dan, thank you so much. We've had a great chat on all topics.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. We could talk about anything, honestly.
Oh, trust me. Hey, listen, we might get you back shortly. You
I
never know.
know. You just give me a subject. As long as it's not a 4-step plan or a tick box, I'm talking. I'm happy to talk.
No ticking.
No,
We're all
no.
good.
Not
No
at all.
run tape.
No, it was lovely. It's been really, it's a pleasure. And
Yeah.
I'd just like to take this moment to say thank you to all the educators out there. Honestly, I've met lots of them, and they do an amazing job. They truly do an amazing job. So I just wanted to say thank you to them. So yeah.
No, that's perfect to do that here. And so what I want to say is we'll share any information you want to give to us with our podcast, socials, links, information about Kinderloop,
Cool.
what we can do, and thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. It's been lovely, Paula. Thank you.
Thank you.